Everyone, and thanks for joining us for Monday's edition of Alaska Weather. On this 19th day of October 2020, I'm Dave Percy, a meteorologist with the National Weather Service, hosting Monday's show once again. And first graphic we have is Central Interior there. Hazardous weather graphic and snow advisory that went into effect overnight last night continues through today and until 6 p.m. Currently scheduled to go until 6 p.m. Tuesday, and it's greater Tanana area there and along and just north of the Alaska Range. Outside of the greater Fairbanks area and Northway, not quite into the action there, but still snowfall fall outside of the shaded areas there. And looking at anywhere from 4 to 6 inches total, that's storm totals in that area by tomorrow afternoon. By 6 p.m. Tuesday, with lesser amounts in the Fairbanks area over the time period of the advisory, looking 1 to 3 inches, and so lighter amounts, but definitely maybe even as high as 8 inches there as you get in toward Healy to maybe up toward Denali area, and that'll be the exception more than the rule. Otherwise, the remainder of the state looking pretty good. Strong high pressure building in, actually. So there are no watches, warnings, or advisories for the next 24 hours or beyond here for anywhere in Alaska. The exception being the Aleutians come, let's see, Wednesday with a tightening gradient there and a strong front. May possibly see storm force winds, but that's still a couple of days out as the the gradient tightens between the high over the interior and a pretty active front low pressure area off to the southwest. Excuse me. And on the satellite, you can see the band of cloudiness associated with the persistent light snowfall over the central interior. It extends up to the central Arctic coast and then down across the southeast interior into the Copper River Basin. Gulkana picking about an inch of snow here today, and again the heavier amounts up around the the Tanana Valley and 40-mile country into the central interior areas. Again, 1 to 4 inches falling, and some showers scattered around, mostly north of Kodiak Island. There was another weak band of clouds, kind of the remnants of the system that was just off the southwest coast yesterday, pulling inland, really weakening, but a narrow band of some light snow shower activity. There are actually a couple of bands, but light conditions and clearing out for the south central Alaska area. And it looks like pretty clear skies, or at least some clearing there for the Alaska Peninsula, eastern Aleutians into the Bering Sea. And then a little bit more solid cloud cover from Adak to Kiska Island, Shimia in some breaks, and then heavier clouds with the weather system out there that will be held back out to the west and be directed northward in the Russian Far East as high pressure, strong high pressure continues to build over the Bering Sea, but the whole pattern will be shifting eastward, which will put the high end over the interior here later in the period. And the southeast coast, partly mostly cloudy with some scattered shower activity. Looks like mostly in the north, maybe toward Hyder and Stewart, but nothing too terribly heavy in the way of any measurable precipitation, but enough to kick off a few showers down there. Again, mostly up along the north coast and around toward Yakutat and then the southern panhandle of that trough. Main low in the Gulf of Alaska, weak, and most of the shower activity and precipitation is in the Gulf of Alaska there in the offshore area. Then we had the light snow across the Copper River Basin. I mentioned 1 to 2 inches in some areas around Glen Allen, Gulkana, but winds are light up into the interior there. But again, quite an area of light snow persisting, which, you know, will give a storm total by tomorrow afternoon of anywhere from 4 to 6 inches to as high as 8 inches, and then other areas, like I mentioned, outside the advisory area, we'll see 1 to 3 inches across that 48-hour period. And then the moisture really scatters out and lightens up when you get into Central Brooks Range today and basically dry north coast, or the north slope and the Arctic coast with light winds. And you can see strong high pressure building there just west or northwest of Nikolsky, or northeast of AKwx. And that resulting in clearing light winds there for the Aleutians into the central Bering Sea up towards St. Lawrence Island. Light winds, dry day, maybe a few showers in Seward Peninsula, and some scattered showers there along the Bristol Bay area into the Alaska Peninsula, continuing to clear out there for Kodiak Island. And farther out to the west on the west and northwest quadrant of the high, a couple of weak disturbances in the southwest flow. And again, that moisture getting carried into the Russian Far East. That'll continue into tonight. You can see one surge there, although starting to, looks like it's poised to bring some moisture into St. Lawrence Island. If it does, it won't occur until tomorrow, and with the mild southwest flow being in the form of rain. And another low, not all that impressive, developing there just east of Kamchatka Peninsula. Otherwise, high pressure, southeast Bering, Bristol Bay, 1,038 millibars, 1,015 millibar low just off the north coast of the Panhandle. Great gradient tightening up there, Kodiak Island. Look for some gusty north-northwest winds, maybe as high as 40 miles an hour out of the east side bays. Also winds gusting 30 miles an hour today for Seward. Those will begin to increase tonight slowly, and tomorrow as snow continues in the central interior. And for Tuesday, high pressure, 1,036 millibars now up there north of Eagle, southwest of Old Crow, and near the border there. But anyway, another center there building into the southwest interior for Tuesday. So that's going to dominate the weather for interior Alaska, eastern Bering Sea, and eventually into the Panhandle and the North Gulf Coast for tomorrow. And that's kind of trapped that area of light snow that's slowly diminishing, becoming more showery and lighter. And like I said, the advisories are due to end at 6 p.m. Tuesday, or they'll kick them out a little longer, or it could end sooner. Otherwise, just a few skiffs of snow clipping the eastern Beaufort Sea coast, possibly with the main disturbances passing by, mostly to the north, and then a little bit stronger system out there, way out there, just east of Kamchatka Peninsula. That front will drag across the far western Aleutians and actually increase the moisture all the way over to Adak and Atka tomorrow afternoon due to easterly flow and that stronger system down to the south that's coming onto the into the picture now. Otherwise, for Wednesday, you can see quite a gradient now due to the 1,046 millibar high there near Dawson, and then a 988 millibar low south of the west central Aleutians. So the gradient could possibly tighten up enough for some possible storm force winds, definitely gale force winds, Alaska Peninsula, with rain heavy at times on the southern side of the peninsula, and pretty wet and windy also for the eastern Aleutians. All of the southern Bering Sea, probably looking at gale force winds out of the east, turning northeast into Shimiatu and Kiska, and the front right on top of the central Aleutians. Otherwise, north side of that high, passing troughs, areas of passing light snow will be working their way from west-southwest to east-northeast, and by afternoon Wednesday, one trough will be right on the eastern Beaufort Sea coast. Otherwise, clear, cool, and dry. Mostly clear, cool, and dry for central southern Alaska, including the Panhandle and Kodiak Island, increasing clouds and wind late in the day into Wednesday night. And for low temperatures Tuesday morning, single numbers east side and 20s central Arctic coast and 20s and 30s over the southwest interior. And then you get out toward the coastline and you're looking at mid-30s there for the St. Lawrence Island area. Well, that's a little farther than off the coastline. And then, of course, out in the Bering Sea, near 40 for the Pribilofs and the Aleutians, as well as the Alaska Peninsula Bering Sea side. In the 30s for the lows for the Panhandle. Highs tomorrow, 40s for the southeast coast. Upper 30s, lower 40s, south central Alaska, to 45 near Homer, about 40 for Seward, near freezing for Gulkana. In the lower 30s for the central interior, cooling into the upper teens and lower 20s at Brooks Range, and then near 40, say for Nome, down to St. Michael, lower 40s for Gamble, Savunga, and Makoriak. Lows Wednesday morning, 0 to 5 or 0 to 10 there over the eastern interior, and in the teens, mid-teens, Copper River Basin, mid-upper 20s, northern Panhandle, lower 30s to the south, and 15 to 25, south central Alaska, into the Kenai Peninsula, mid-30s for Kodiak Island, and then the highs for Wednesday afternoon, near 20 over the northeast interior, 15 to 20 in the Brooks Range, but notice the central coast, western central Arctic coast rising in the mid-30s, near 50 Kodiak Island, 30s and 40s for the Panhandle, and upper 40s.
And now, Aviation weather around Alaska.
Flying weather for Tuesday morning on the graphic here. We've got IFR, central western Arctic coast, down the northwest coast across Kotzebue Sound and into the western interior there, eastern Seward Peninsula, most of Norton Sound, and then on down along the Kuskokwim Valley, southern Kuskokwim Valley, Talkeetna Mountains into northeast Bristol Bay. And then areas of marginal VFR, eastern interior from the Arctic coast, all the way down toward Prince William Sound, and then VFR, North Gulf Coast areas of, and then northward to the Brooks Range, and marginal VFR. For most of the southeast coast, there was some IFR over toward the border, and some pretty good VFR, Kodiak Island, Alaska Peninsula, southern Bering Sea, all of the Aleutians, and St. George Island, St. Paul Island, right on the marginal edge there. And for the afternoon, tomorrow afternoon, we've got IFR for the northwest coast, Kivalina, Point Hope, Cape Lisburne, and maybe the central Arctic coast there, Wainwright, maybe to Point Barrow, and then eastern Beaufort Sea coast, marginal VFR, with marginal VFR western interior down to the Alaska Range and the north side in the afternoon, south of the mountains, though, VFR all the way into the Gulf of Alaska, and marginal VFR southern half of the southeast coast, more give or take, and Kodiak Island, VFR, and Bristol Bay, Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta, VFR, Pribilos, VFR, and the central eastern Aleutians, Alaska Peninsula, VFR. And then a band of IFR coming into the far western Aleutians tomorrow afternoon by Wednesday morning, spreads eastward and covers just about the entire stretch of the Aleutian chain there. And then marginal VFR up the Alaska Peninsula to roughly Port Hayden or so, or just to the west of Port Hayden, Pribilof's marginal, and southwest coast, all in the VFR zone, all of southern Alaska into the northern three quarters of the southeast coast there. And then IFR over the central interior with marginal VFR across the central Tanana Valley into the Brooks, or into the Alaska Range. And the Brooks Range, not too bad, especially the east side there, North Slope, central eastern areas, VFR. IFR right along the western and central Arctic coast. And for the Wednesday afternoon time frame, we're looking at IFR across all of the Aleutians and Alaska Peninsula continuing. Then right into the VFR, Kodiak Island, Bristol Bay, all the southwest coast. Again, the Pribilof's right on the edge of the marginal zone there. And St. Lawrence Island, IFR, Seward Peninsula, central northern areas, IFR, northwest coast, IFR, central Arctic coast, IFR. And still IFR there along the Yukon River. Koyukuk Valley, really kind of right on top of the valley there, spilling into the Kobuk and the western Yukon Flats. And otherwise, VFR for the southeast coast. So passes, Anatuvik, marginal becoming VFR. Adigan, same trend, low conditions early on. VFR possibly by midday or late morning through the afternoon. Lake Clark and Merrill starting out marginal and becoming VFR during the morning hours through the afternoon. Rainy, marginal VFR becoming VFR. And for windy, marginal VFR becomes VFR, but lingering on the north entrance. It'll probably stay marginal the entire day. And again, marginal VFR all day on the north entrance Isabel, otherwise through the pass and south, becoming VFR. Mentasta, marginal becoming VFR. And for Tanita, marginal VFR becoming VFR. And for Portage, marginal conditions improve throughout the day, probably again by late morning or noontime, VFR from then into the evening. And Chilkoot and White, IFR early, briefly, rapidly becomes VFR. And for the freezing levels at the surface tomorrow morning, right along just about all the coastline there, and then cutting across the northern panhandle, 2,000 feet, mainly for the southeast coast there. And at icing, high pressure, keeping either the heavier icing way off to the west, maybe grazing the Aleutians there with a threat of some light rime icing, and then keeping it south of the eastern Aleutians, and just a few areas of possible potential light icing there along the Alaska Range, a little bit to the north there, northern Bering Sea to the Strait, and over the southeast coast. Jet stream south of the area, 155 knots across the Queen Charlotte's, big ridge out over the Bering Sea, 9,000 feet. Again, strongest winds either to the west or the south of the area. Also at 3,000 feet with good high pressure, eastern Bering Sea into the western interior. Turbulence, light to isolated moderate chop. Again, that northwest flow, southern Kenai Peninsula, Kodiak Island and the eastern Aleutians will see the greatest threat of some moderate turbulence below 5,000.
On March 11, 2011, a 9.0 magnitude earthquake off the Pacific coast of Japan generated a tsunami. This series of ocean waves sped towards the island nation, with waves reaching 24 feet high. The result was devastation and utter destruction. Towns were engulfed by water and swept away. Farmland was flooded. Tens of thousands of lives were lost. The National Police Agency reported damages to hundreds of roads, bridges, and more than 100,000 buildings. The surging water flooded rivers and destroyed harbors. In some areas along the coast, tsunami waves reached 6 miles inland. Tsunamis not only cause severe damage when they first strike land, but also as the water recedes back to sea. Tsunamis can inflict this type of damage because of some unique features. As tsunami waves travel across ocean basins, they may be as little as a few centimeters high, but they extend down to the ocean floor. This is different than traditional waves, which are only surface features. Tsunamis can also travel hundreds of miles per hour in the open ocean. As these waves approach a coast, the shallowing ocean floor slows the waves down and pushes the water mass upwards. The quicker the ocean floor transitions from deep to shallow, the greater potential for a higher wave height. So, tsunamis that experience this sudden shift into shallow water can have the height and momentum to pack a serious punch. Unfortunately, Japan found itself in this scenario. This image shows how abruptly the Japanese islands rise out of the ocean. Other coastal areas in the region have much more gradual slopes. The earthquake on March 11th was the most powerful known to hit Japan, and the tsunami it created had the necessary ingredients to make it such a deadly and destructive force. "80 miles east of Japan, a 9.0 magnitude earthquake rocks the ocean floor. This disturbance causes a transfer of energy from the seafloor to the ocean, generating a series of ocean waves, known as a tsunami. In about 20 minutes, waves strike the Japanese coastline. Other nations go on high alert because the tsunami will propagate or spread throughout the Pacific Ocean. As the tsunami radiates outward from Japan, it encounters a variety of ocean features, such as ridges and underwater volcanoes, which guide the tsunami and create a complex pattern of scattering and reflective waves. In 8 hours, the waves reach the Hawaiian Islands, and in 9.5 hours, they hit the west coast of the United States. In 16 hours, the tsunami reaches the Indian Ocean and New Zealand, and by 22 hours, the entire Pacific Ocean had been affected. The impact of a tsunami can be highly variable because of the complicated interactions with ocean features and coastline elements. Wave height and speed will differ from place to place. Since tsunamis can be hundreds of miles long and travel thousands of miles away from where they originated, they are considered a worldwide threat when they form. These are the sounds of a tsunami warning. They alert residents that a killer wave is about to strike. These sirens, however, are just a small part of the sophisticated warning systems that played a role in Japan and in the US during the Pacific Ocean tsunami in March 2011. Most tsunamis are generated by an undersea earthquake. Fortunately, Japan has one of the most advanced earthquake early warning systems in the world. It detects tremors, calculates the epicenter, and sends out warnings from over 1,000 seismographs scattered throughout the country. The Japan Meteorological Agency issues the warnings and sends alerts to television and radio channels, the internet, and mobile phone networks. When the earthquake struck 80 miles offshore, warnings were generated in about 3 seconds. The tsunami warnings came 3 minutes later. These take longer because more complex calculations are involved and must factor in ocean data. Since the first tsunami wave struck the coastline within 20 minutes, the advanced warning provided some residents with crucial minutes to reach a safe area. While the earthquake sent powerful tsunami waves westward toward Japan, the tsunami also propagated east into the Pacific Ocean. Here, warnings are issued by the Pacific Tsunami Warning Center, operated by NOAA in Hawaii. NOAA maintains a large network of buoys with ocean floor sensors that are strategically positioned in the earthquake-prone zones of the Pacific. This system collects vital ocean data for tsunami forecasting. On March 11th, only 25 minutes after the earthquake struck, the first buoy station measured the tsunami and relayed information to Hawaii. Scientists used this data to run models and issue forecasts and warnings to nations throughout the Pacific. From there, local emergency managers decided what actions were appropriate to take for public safety. The earthquake and resulting tsunami devastated the Japanese coastline, causing damage that will take years to repair. While we can't prevent these forces of nature from happening, our early warning systems can help us prepare for the dangers headed our way.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back. Look for an increase in the winds, especially over the northern inside waters of the southeast coast. Lynn Canal, north sustained 30 knots, definitely higher gusts for Eldred Rock. And then down to 15 knots out of the north for Stevens Passage, becoming lighter and more variable over the southern inside channels. Clarence Strait forecasting winds from the south at 10 knots. And for the south coast, west-northwest winds at 20 knots. And the north coast, east-northeast 15 to 20 knots, seas 7 feet, but up to 9 feet in the south coast. And for Wednesday, small craft advisories on the north coast there. East-northeasterlies picking up and increasing to 25 knots with 7-foot seas. And the south coast, north winds 20 knots, seas 7 to 8 foot seas, or seas 7 to 8 feet. Clarence Strait, northwesterlies 15 knots, seas 3 feet. Small craft advisory Stevens Passage for north winds at 25, and still looking at 30 knot winds out of the north for Lynn Canal. And for Prince William Sound, northwest winds 20 knots, seas 3 feet, and kind of a pretty gusty type pattern developing there from the North Gulf Coast, especially out of the Copper River Delta later tomorrow afternoon, and around Middleton Island there in the marine zone, north 20, gust 45, small craft advisories, western North Gulf Coast, northwest 25, and bring it up to 30 knots out of the northwest for the Barren Islands. Full gales over Kamishak Bay, northwest 40 knots, 14-foot seas, Cook Inlet, northerlies 10 to 15. And then for Wednesday, northern Cook Inlet, north 15 knots, 4-foot seas, small craft advisory, south of the Forelands, 25-knot northeast winds. Kamishak Bay coming down 10 knots, swinging around to the northeast at 30 with 8-foot seas, east 20 knots of Barren Islands. East-northeast wind, 20 knots for the North Gulf Coast, 4 to 5-foot seas, and 15 knots out of the north with 3-foot seas for Prince William Sound. Kodiak Island, northwest, 25 to 30 knots, higher gusts out of the eastern bays there, like Woman's Bay, for example. And Sitkinak to Castle Cape, northwest 25, and for the Alaska Peninsula, east-northeast 25 knots, small craft advisories, 5-foot seas though, not too bad with that, and northwest 25, 5-foot seas for Bristol Bay. And then big increase in the winds, and looks like storm warnings right now coming into the forecast. South side of the Alaska Peninsula, Cape Sarachev, all the way up to Sitkinak. East winds, 50 knots sustained, seas around 20 feet. And high-end gales there on the Bering Sea side of the peninsula, 45 knots out of the east, 13-foot seas. Full gales there for the Bristol Bay zone, east 40 knots, 8-foot seas. And Kodiak Island, east-northeast at 30 with 6 to 9-foot seas. And for the eastern Aleutians, tomorrow, small craft advisories, east winds 25 to 30 knots, strongest on the Pacific side of the islands. Small crafts also for the AKwx area out of the east at 25, southeast 25 to 30 for the western Aleutians. And for Wednesday, from Shimei and Attu to Kiska, northeast at 30 knots, and about the same for Amchitka, northeast winds 30 knots, 12-foot seas. And minimum gales are for the AKwx area, 30 to 35 knot winds out of the northeast with seas up to 18 feet. And 40 to 50 knot winds now for the eastern Aleutians out of the east, and seas running 16 to 22 feet. For the southwest coast tomorrow, northeast 10 to 15, 4 to 5 foot seas. St. Matthew Island, southwest 15, Pribilofs east 20, St. Lawrence Island, southwest 15, and turning westerly, dropping off to 10 knots in Norton Sound. Norton Sound on Wednesday, east 15, 20 knots out of the east for St. Lawrence Island. And the Yukon Delta Coast, minimum gales, east 35 knots, 9-foot seas, and full gales to high-end gales there for the Kuskokwim Delta Coast, east 45 knots, blowing all the way across the Pribilof Islands at the same speed with 18-foot seas there. And up along the eastern Beaufort Sea coast, not too bad wind-wise tomorrow, west at 15, seas 2 feet in the ice-free areas. Central and west side, southwest 20, 4 to 6 foot seas, and Cape Beaufort to Wales, southerlies at 20 knots out of the south. And for Wednesday, south 15 knots from Wales to Cape Thompson to Cape Beaufort, southwest 20, and then small craft advisories either side of western Arctic coast, and 20 knot southwest winds for the central and east side, dropping off to 15 out of the west as you get toward demarcation point. And for tonight, over that way, around Barter Island, Kaktovik, maybe some flurries, otherwise dry for the Arctic coast, variable clouds. And the snow advisory continues tonight for the central interior Tanana Valley in toward the Alaska Range, Healy, Nenana, anywhere from continued light snow, a few more inches, and starting to taper off in the Copper River Basin, system moving in the Panhandle for wet conditions, but nothing heavy. And winds on the increase for Kodiak with clearing skies. That continues into Wednesday, but a big increase in the winds for the Aleutians and Alaska Peninsula with rain.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.